I'm already sweating. I'm stressed about this freaking sweater. Hi, my name's Mark and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing some sweater surgery. I'm a surgeon for the day and I'll be working on correcting the neckline to my Modern Love sweater. If you watched last weekend's video, you'll have seen the issue I found with the shape of the neck. So today we're going in, thanks to some of your brilliant suggestions and comments, to fix that. Let's get into it. A few notes before I get started. For those of you who care, today I'm wearing my Weekender sweater from Andrea Mowry. I made this out of Malabrigo Rios in the color Siri, S-I-R-I. And I'm happy with how it turned out. I like the color pooling. I didn't do any sort of alternating of skeins. Here, I'll stand up a little bit. I just worked with the yarn as it presented itself. I guess you can see here maybe a little bit of difference in the pooling, but overall I think the sweater looks fairly regular. And let me scoot back up. And I was happy with the color pooling and working with this combination of colorway and pattern. So the Weekender by Andrea Mowry, made out of Malabrigo Rios in the color Siri. Next item of business, right outside my window, there are jackhammers going. They have been repaving this road, it seems like for the last 2 years. For about 6 months during a stretch of last year, this road was completely closed off, and so we had to always loop the far way around the block to get out whenever we were leaving the house. And so then maybe 2 weeks ago, it started again. So I hope you cannot hear the jackhammers. I have the interference sort of noise canceling turned on with my microphone. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you're not listening to jackhammers for this video like I am. So, as mentioned in my opening, today I am working on fixing the neckline of this sweater. So I'm just throwing it around here. Hopefully you can see right here this uneven pucker. I can't point and look at my monitor. Everything's, I guess, sort of mirrored. You can see this pucker where the neckline does not match up. And I'll insert some of the footage of my husband wearing the sweater where I think you can see it in a more pronounced way. And then I've also got my above head camera here to give you an idea of how this lays. I've just ruffled it up, tossed it down, and you can immediately see this weird shape of the neck and how that fights against the crew neck ribbing. So thank you to so many great suggestions, a lot of really good troubleshooting ideas shared by you in the comments, and I'm going to share my favorite one. Give me one moment to find it. All right, the advice I'm going to follow today comes from YouTube user NaniCab or NaniCab355. This comment is pinned at the top of the comments on my sweater SOS video that I posted last week, all about the Modern Love sweater. So this user, this commenter, says that they're sorry for the mishaps here. For the puckering, they recommend shaping the oval shape I want, kind of tracing it on the sweater, and then picking up those stitches and knitting the collar, knitting the ribbed bit at the top, and then going in and trimming away the excess fabric from the center. So if that does not make sense to you, let me explain what's going on. For many of you watching, you commented something similar, so you already know what I'm saying. Bear with or skip ahead. So I'm going to go back to my overhead camera here. Looking at the sweater, the back of the neck is fine. It's a straight line. Coming down the sides from here to here is also fine. And then I have a little portion in the center. Let me zoom in. A little portion here in the center that is also level. So if you were with me for last week's video, I drew a little sketch of how the neckline of this sweater before picking up stitches for the collar was shaped kind of like a seashell, where the back of it is rounded and smooth. It comes naturally curved at the sides, but then like a seashell, it juts forward and then juts down and straight across. Sort of that shape, if you can follow what I'm saying here. So the back of it is fine, straight across. The way it tapers around is also fine, but then we have this angular section of extra fabric causing these puckers. And I think the reason the sweater was set up this way by the designer was to accommodate this herringbone pattern, the chevron pattern in the color work, but it doesn't make for a flattering or natural looking neckline. So we're going to go in, do some surgery, and fix it. So Nanika or Nanikab was suggesting I go in and I trace the shape I want, meaning if I start here at the center where I like the natural placement of this, then here where I have the puckering, I'm going to trace along lower. I'm not going to pick up stitches at the very edge. I'm going to pick them up lower, which will then leave me with extra fabric that's folded sitting on the inside, but the neckline you see and the neckline we will end up with is perfectly oval or round. And the best part of this is that because I used a non-superwash wool, I can actually cut those extra bits of fabric off and the sweater is not going to completely unravel. So because it's a non-superwash wool, I talk about this sometimes, it's a sort of sticky wool, meaning that the stitches cling to one another, the fiber clings to itself in a way that really supports color work and in a way that supports the garment so that you can steek it, S-T-E-E-K. Some people are excited about steeking. Some people have said, I've never heard of that. What do you mean? So today, hopefully, I will pick up this neckline in the round shape we want, work the neck. Then once I know that I'm happy with the shape, I'll go to the inside where we have the extra fabric and I will steek it. I will cut it open, reinforce that edge, and make sure the garment is really finished in a polished way. So here on the inside, this is the reverse side of that flap. You can see the shape, the extra fabric I'm talking about. So ideally, once we've done this, our neckline will come straight across here, and I'll have this extra little flap that I can trim off and steek. So let's get started. I'm stressed. I'm sweating already. I've said before, I hate doing things. I hate doing the same job over and over. If I've done the task, if I've completed the job, I don't want to have to do it again. So having a situation like this where something in the fit just doesn't work out and I have to rip back or find a solution like this, it's frustrating. It's not the kind of crafting that I want to be doing. I want to be finishing other projects or starting new exciting projects. I don't want to be going in and cleaning up a mistake, or, I mean, this is not a mistake on my part, but cleaning up something that seemed like somewhat of a design flaw. So into my needle storage I go. I need some 16-inch circular needles to work the circumference of the neck. And I also need to know what size needle I was using for this sweater. Let's see, I wasn't on 4s. I was probably on 3.5s. That's a 375. 3275. And with my luck, I won't even have them in here. I'm going to go with a 3.75 millimeter. I think the body of this sweater was worked on a 4 millimeter. So I'm going down a little bit for the ribbing. Sometimes a designer will have you go down a full size. Other times you go down like a half size. So this is all right. And then I want my 16-inch needle total. So I have an 8-inch cord, 2 4-inch tips. All together, that makes 16. One time I tried to do that math in front of the camera, and it was pathetic. I said something like, oh, I need an 8-inch cord and 2, I don't know what I said. I think I said a 4-inch cord and 2 4-inch tips, and that makes 16. And then I had to pause, do some math, and realize that I'm an idiot. So step one is going to be to rip out this ribbing. So I did this before. I thought that maybe pulling back the initial ribbing that I knit would help the sweater lay more naturally, and it did not. So this will be the second time I'm going in to rip the ribbing out, and it will be the third time I'm knitting the ribbing. So I'm annoyed. And as I mentioned, because this is sticky, as I try to pull out the ribbing, the yarn is going to fight with me. It's going to get stuck to itself. You can see I can only pull for a couple inches and then it gets stuck again. Let's see, maybe we're on a roll now. Nope, it's stuck again. Ugh. This is so annoying. Okay. After lots of snipping, my neckline is all pulled out. It looks like a little sheep. How cute is that? And I'm not going to reuse this yarn because somewhere I have more of it. I didn't use all my yarn when I was knitting the sweater. If you needed to reuse your yarn, you would have had to rip this back really, really carefully, and then you would need to wind it back into some sort of hank and steam it or let it soak so that it's no longer so coily. If you try to knit with your yarn this coily, you'll probably end up with stitches that are super ragged and don't really speak to your true tension and gauge. So this is out, and let's take a look at the neckline. You can see it now in all its glory. What a goofy neckline. It's got these scallops, and I promise I did not make this up as I was going along. I followed the instructions, and this is just the shape of the neckline. I'm quietly frustrated. Now I need to pick up my stitches, and I want to pick up a straight line across here to here. That's probably a good guide. So I'm only going to be getting rid of a very small flap of fabric, but it should result in the sweater sitting normally and looking perfect, looking exactly how I want it to look. Now, as I mentioned, I have more of this yarn, so I need to use that yarn to pick up my stitches. And I don't know where the yarn is. I finished this sweater while I was in Tucson a month or two ago, so I had the yarn on the trip. I brought it back home, and it's somewhere. So give me a minute to find the yarn. I should have done that before sitting down to film, but I forgot. Okay, yarn in hand. I am ready to reshape this neckline. Now, the commenter recommended that I go in first and trace what I want with some scrap yarn. And I think that's a good idea. Just so I'm not doing this for a fourth time or a fifth time, I'm getting the result I want the first time through. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this green yarn I have sitting in front of me. Oh, I'm going to have to find the end of it. And I don't need too much. I really just need this for the front portion. So I'm going to take a couple yards, maybe one to 2 yards. Snip that. And now I'm going to run this through a tapestry or darning needle. And we will use this to trace the shape that I want for this neckline. Let's see. So starting from this corner point to sort of this corner. This is my front center that I'm happy with. This is the side that I think already fits sort of a natural shape, so I'm not going to mess with the side. I think that this raglan corner is going to pick up on its own. I think that's going to be all right. That's the general idea. I know you probably can't even see this. Thinking if I fold that back, that's the shape I'm looking for. So I'm just leaving this scrap yarn in as a guide. I could go one step further and use a scrap yarn to pick up every single stitch that I intend to pick up, but I think I'm gonna freehand that as I go, because if you haven't met me, I'm Mark, and I like to do things in the moment a little bit more haphazardly. So we'll see. Hopefully this all turns out smoothly. Okay, and that's that flap. So if I fold that under, I think it results in a more rounded neck. All right, trimming my excess, I can set that aside. Now I'm ready to go in and pick up my stitches. So I've got my unused yarn here, and I'm going to start at the side of the sort of shoulder, side of the neck, because that's where I want each row to start and stop, so that when I bind off at the end and where I'm starting my pickup, it's not going to be noticeable. It's not going to be right in the front center. It's not going to be along the front edges. So I'm actually going on the back raglan. And I'm going to pick up through, I'm going to try to pick up the back and the sides along the cast on, but we'll see. We'll see what we like. When I pick up stitches, I pick up my first stitch, and then my second stitch I always wrap both strands around. So it does make that stitch heavier, more bulky, but it also secures the tail in a way that I like. Now, when I did this before, I picked up stitch for stitch. Sometimes the instructions for picking up tell you to pick up 2 stitches for every 3, or if you're doing it along a different direction of knitting, you might pick up 2 stitches for every 3 rows, or 1 for every 2. So a pattern usually gives you some sort of guidance. Sometimes patterns don't. They might just say, pick up stitches for the neck, pick up evenly, or pick up evenly for a sleeve. And you just have to do what looks right. So sometimes it means you do it a couple of times to get the tension right. You don't want too many stitches where it starts to sort of flounce out, and you don't want too few where it draws it in too much and manipulates the fabric. So this is what it looks like for me picking up stitch for stitch. I think it's pretty even. My ribbing's going to come in a little bit, but it's not going to be powerful enough to make the sweater cinch. So I'm going to continue stitch for stitch. And I don't know if you can see or care, but as I do this, I'm just going in to the stitch in the final row, and then picking up, knitting a stitch into that. Okay, I think this looks pretty rounded. This is where it naturally picks up, and then this is the part I've adjusted. There's still space here, but I think that's space that will be filled out by the body. We will find out. I feel so stupid doing this, thinking if it doesn't work out, I'm just doing it again and again, or abandoning it, but this looks good so far, so let me keep going. now I'm back to the regular stitches. This is the front center, so I'm just going to pick up stitch for stitch here without adapting anything. And I was mentioning before, I'm picking up into the top of the final row. So if you can see that on camera with me, here's the column I'm going into, and I'm just going into the heart of it and picking up a stitch. Now I'm here along the next pucker, and I'm going to follow the green lead. And what I found on the other side is that picking up the left leg of each stitch looked the most discreet. So I'm picking up just the left leg, not both legs. If I picked up both legs and then knit into them, it looked like I was twisting the stitch, and it didn't look as discreet. So I'm just following my lead and picking up the left leg of each of those stitches. And as I do this, I'm going to pull the lead just to give me space to see where I'm going. Okay, that's out. So now we get to work back across these. First I'll just check. I think that looks like a better rounding straight edge. So I'm going to grab my other needle, pass these stitches back, and then I will knit them this time. I'm sure for some of you watching there may be much more efficient ways to do this, but as I said, since I'm just working through this problem and I'm frustrated by how many times I've already tried to solve it, I'm being somewhat cautious and at the same time just going in and doing the job that frustrates me. All right, and we're back to where we can start knitting. Since I only picked up the left leg of each stitch, I'm knitting these through the back leg, which should in turn turn them forward and make the stitches I'm picking up look as normal as possible. Just checking. All right, here's that bit picked up. I think it looks pretty normal up top, and on the back, there's that flap. On the other side, there's that flap. So these are the portions we are going to steek. We're going to trim those off and reinforce them, or reinforce, then trim. So At this point, I'm going to continue picking up the rest of my neckline. I'll knit a little bit of it. I may knit all of it. And then the next time you see me, we will be trimming and steeking these parts. All right, we're back to take another look at this neckline. So in front of me, I have the sweater. I've moved the stitches to a barber cord or a stitch saver so that I can stretch things out and get a look at what the neckline will really be like. So if you can see here, I think we've, for the most part, fixed the issue. I think that this rounded neckline looks so much better this way. So I'm much happier with this neckline. I think things look much more rounded. So now it's time to steek. I'm really excited to talk about this technique and to demonstrate a little bit of it here in actual form with this project. So a steek, S-T-E-E-K, is essentially a bridge of extra stitches that you work into a project and later you cut. So in a sweater that's done in the round with color work, I'm carrying several colors, and it makes sense to do that in the round, going in one direction instead of back and forth and back and forth. You can work portions of steek stitches or a channel of steek stitches. Usually you use between 6 and 10 steek stitches. Sometimes people call for 3 stitches for a steek. I've never used only 3. I always do at least 7. I like an odd number so that I can have 3 on one side of the channel, 3 on the other, and then the 7th stitch is the very center, which I'll cut. So it's a sort of guide to know where to cut, and having a little bit wider of a steek panel gives you security that when you cut it, you have a little bit more to work with to reinforce the steek and then to fold it back and secure it. Sometimes after I cut the steek, if I'm needle felting the steek, which is what I'm going to demonstrate today, I will go in after it's really well felted and I'll trim it even closer. So you can play around with it if you're using this technique yourself. The biggest thing to note is that if you are using a sticky fiber, like a non-superwash wool, a natural animal fiber, the steeking is typically easier to do because the fiber already clings to itself. So if you were to cut your sweater open, even if you hadn't reinforced the steek yet, things will hold together pretty well until you do whatever you'd like to reinforce. If you're using an acrylic or cotton or superwash yarn, then you have to be a little bit more careful with the steek. It's best to go in, if you can, with a sewing machine and machine reinforce your steek, or do a crocheted reinforcement, or go in by hand with needle and thread to reinforce before you do any cutting. It will still be able to steek, but it can't steek in a felted way, like a natural animal fiber or a non-superwash animal fiber. So all of that to say, I am using a non-superwash wool today. This is wool stock from Blue Sky Fibers, and then the colorwork portion that we're not steeking is also a non-superwash from Why Not Fibers in Michigan. But the portion that I'm going to steek is the 2 small flaps that I now have on the inside of the collar from where we had those puckers initially in the sweater. So I've picked up a more rounded neckline, which I'm pretty happy with. Still looks a little funky over here. I think I could have come down further. But this sweater is going to be loved and worn, and I think the more it's worn, and when I go in to do another blocking eventually, that part will even itself out a little bit. I've counted, and I do have the matching number of stitches on each side, so I think it just looks a little bit different because of how the fabric stretched the last time I blocked it. So I have my stitches of the neckline held on a barber cord or stitch saver, just so I can get the needles out of the way, really lay this flat, and work on my steek. After that, I'm going to have my husband try the sweater back on. I'll see if I like the length of the collar or if I want to go for another 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, etc. So that's why it's on barber cord. I'm going to let him try it on once I've trimmed these pieces away and see exactly what length we want for the final fit. So let's get into steeking. For this demonstration of steeking, I'm going to needle felt my portions that will be steeked. So I have a block of foam. It's a pretty thick block. And then I also have a needle felting tool. This is from Clover, and it's a very cool little tool. It has several barbed needles. Let's see if I can demonstrate them or show them off. I'm very carefully holding this up because I don't want to catch my finger on any of these needles. If you can see the uneven bits of the needles, those are the barbs. So it's got a guard, and the idea is that you take your foam with your fabric on top, and when you depress this, the guard lifts, and all of those barbed needles insert, and on their way back out, really start to felt the fiber because of the barbs that get caught. So if you're using any sort of needle felting tool, be really careful that it stays away from fingers. If you have kids, if you have animals, make sure it goes securely into a cabinet or something out of reach so they're not going to stumble upon it. So I've got this needle felting tool, my foam, and then I'll just need a good pair of sharp scissors. And what we're going to do first is a little bit of felting to reinforce the steek. I'm going to turn the sweater inside out just so we can get to those flaps more easily. And on camera here, you can see the flap. I've secured the fabric on the other side by picking up the stitches. So now the next step is to secure the edge of this flap, which I will do by needle felting it, and then I can trim this flap away so it's not even felt on the inside of the sweater. If you are using a different method to secure your steek, like sewing it, you could take this to your sewing machine and you could run this little flap. There it is. You could run this little flap under your sewing machine a couple of times, and then once that's secured, you could snip the excess. But we're going to needle felt it because I think this is really fun and it seems like a really natural way to do it. So let me zoom in a bit. I'm taking my block of foam. I'm going to let the camera stop shaking. I'm taking my block of foam, the flap that I need to needle felt, which is just this little flap here. It's like an inch, maybe at most, 3/4 of an inch that I'm just going to snip off. And I want to reinforce along the channel where I picked up the stitches. So this little tool has a lock. I can twist it and then nothing happens when I press on it. I want to unlock it and then I'm going to run it through the section that I need to cut. And as I do that over and over again, it's going to start to felt this area and you'll see what that looks like. So here we go. I make sure to keep my fingers out of the way as I do this. And then I'm just going over and over again, stabbing into the fabric. As I do this, if you look on this camera with me, you'll see that the fabric starts to stick to the block and I have to kind of lift it off. If I flip it over, it's starting to get a little fuzzy. And that fuzz is because it's just starting to felt. So I'm going to rotate my block. It's good to keep the block moving if you're felting the same section over and over. And we'll keep on stabbing. I learned how to do needle felted. Oh, I realize now my camera is shaking as I do this, so maybe I won't talk to you too much. I don't want it to look crazy on screen. I learned how to needle felt from one of the owners at Around the Table Yarns in Shaker Heights. That's Pam. She was really sweet to sit down with me when I had my Maya cardigan, and she helped me locate the steek, snip it open, and showed me how I need to go about needle felting to reinforce. And that was a big task. I have a large sweater, and it was the whole front of it being cut open. So that was time consuming. I probably took an hour or two just to needle felt it so that it was really felted and reinforced. This won't take that long. This will maybe take 5 to 10 minutes to get both sides felted. Okay, let's take a look. So now I'm going to lift it off of the foam again, and hopefully you can see it's really getting fuzzy. And if I feel it, it no longer feels like separate stitches. It feels like felted, dense fabric. So if you look at the front of it, you'll notice the front still looks like knit stitches, while the back of it is starting to get a bit more homogeneous, a bit more ambiguous. You can't tell that they were stitches anymore, it's just a piece of fabric. And that's because the barbed wires, or the barbed, not wires, the barbed needles are pulling back up through the bottom layer. So when I'm steeking something, I'll often flip it if I want to really felt that channel. Because again, this is the part we're cutting off. This is not a part that will be seen on the finished sweater. So now I'm just felting on the reverse side. Let me turn this on the side so you can see what's happening. So as the guard presses down, the needles move past it, and they go through the fabric and lift back up, pulling the barbs through, helping to felt the wool. And let's take a look. So now when I lift this off, that's great. You can see that the stitches are starting to disappear. The last time I showed this to you, you could really see the columns of knits. Now it's starting to become just a fuzzy mess. So I think really it's ready to cut. If I cut this now, it would hold, but I'm going to go over it for just another minute or two to make sure that this is really reinforced. I've only ever steeked something once before. So because I'm new to it, I want to be more cautious and make sure I'm not doing something to unravel my sweater. And I'll flip it over, and I'm just going to go one more pass through this direction. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So you can see one side of it, and the other side's looking pretty felted. And I'll see if I can show you here. You can see the difference between the knit stitches here, the ribbing, and then this felted portion. The felted portion no longer really looks like a knitted texture. And then the reverse side of it there, you can still see some of the reverse stockinette. So now we cut it, and this seems scary, but it doesn't need to be scary. So I'm going to cut from the side where I can see the pickup. I don't want to cut from this side because I can't tell where it's been joined. So I'm cutting from sort of the right side of it when I'm looking. And I'm going to use a sharp pair of scissors. So I have my little Madeline Tosh scissors that are super duper sharp. And I like that they have a small blade. I don't really want to go in with a big pair of scissors because I might not see where I'm going. And I only get one chance to do this. So I am going to cut about 1/4 inch out. That's where I'm going to start. And make sure as you cut that you're aware of the reverse side, that you're not stacking up fabric and cutting into something that hasn't been reinforced. Okay, there we have it. So I've cut this off, and I still have this sort of rough felted bit of knitting. And when I turn it up, it's less felted. But now, when this sits on the inside of the collar, it's just going to be the smallest ridge, and I'll show you what I do to help secure that. So, I'm going to lay this part flat, like I want it to lay, and I'm going to turn to the right side. And from the right side, I don't know that this is recommended, so if you are a knitting guru, a knitting teacher out there, don't yell at me. I'm going to felt very lightly from the front. And as you could see before, whatever is the front side or the top side of your work as you're felting with this barbed needle, it's not really doing much to aggravate the front of the work. Instead, it's really felting from the back as those barbs pull through. So with my cardigan, when I had the long channel of steek stitches, after I trimmed away the excess, I folded it under and I steeked very gently, or needle felted very gently from the front, which helped make the steek portion cling to the front. And it saved me from having to go through and use needle and thread or ribbon or any sort of interfacing. So that's what I'm going to try here in this sweater. I just have this little channel. It's just between my fingers here. And from the front, I'm just going to really gently go through with my barbed needle. And I'll probably do 5 to 10 passes of this. I'm not going to go in with the intent of felting this section. I'm just doing this to help tack the trimmed portion of the steek in place. And hopefully you can see as I'm doing this, this section has not been felted. It still looks like knit stitches, but hopefully what we're doing is tacking down that folded portion in the back. Okay, so now when I lift it up and look at it on the back, it did exactly what I wanted. Now that little bit that I trimmed is almost disappearing. You can see it here. If I try to lift it up, it's stuck to the rest of the sweater. And that's just going to help it when my husband wears this sweater. He's not going to feel that ridge as much. It's not going to be flapping around. He's not going to tug at it. It's not going to be something that he or anyone else who inherits this sweater would ever try to cut away or do anything to. It's going to be minimally noticeable, and it's really going to be tacked down in place. So this far edge of it, I think, could use a couple more passes. So I'm just going to target that area before we leave this side. And I think that's pretty well tacked. Great. Here it is on the front camera. So this channel between my fingers is where we trimmed away the excess. Sorry, there to there. And you can see that little edge is now really tacked down. And the more this is worn, the more this is soaked and washed, the more those raw edges will felt. So eventually they will be completely seamless. You won't even notice them. But using a tool like this is a really quick fix to make that happen in 10 minutes versus waiting for it to be worn over a year or 2 years. And I didn't show this up close. This was the little bit we cut off. So it doesn't look like much at all, but this much was really causing a fit issue before, and having a flap this big just sit on the inside of your sweater, I think would be annoying. I'm one of those people that doesn't like tags in the back of a shirt. I don't really like a big seam, so making my own sweaters is great because I can do them as seamlessly as possible or use a technique that I think makes it as gentle to wear as possible. So we have one side of the neckline fixed. Let's go in and steek the other side, and then we're done. I mean, I have to try this on my husband, finish the collar, but that's maybe 10-20 minutes of work remaining. So we're almost done. This is also super fun if you feel like you have any stored up stress or aggression. The bouncy sort of stabbing motion of the steeking, it's fun. It feels like I'm a kid and I'm hammering on a play set or building something out of blocks and knocking it down. It's sort of fun, gentle destruction with a really nice end goal of a fixed sweater. Here is the front of the sweater with the corrected neckline. I think this is a huge improvement. I'll have Ned try it on and we'll see if we like the length of the ribbing. I'll probably end up doing another 1/4 to 1/2 inch of ribbing, but I just wanted to pause before having to pull back for a 3rd or 4th time now. So thank you again. Thank you to this YouTube user for giving me the best advice. Such great advice. I'll check in again with you before I finish this completely. I'll make sure to show it on Ned so we can do a compare and contrast of what it looked like before and what it looks like now, hopefully fixed. So I'll check in with you and that'll be the end of the video. All right, I'm sitting down with you for hopefully the final installment of anything to do with this sweater. So in front of me, I've got what I think is the final product. You can see I haven't cut my tail yet, and that is because after I spent the time steeking, fixing the collar of this, needle felting the back, trimming away the excess, and then trying it on my husband, I worked some of the collar, which I showed you just a few minutes ago. And I tried it on him to see how much more collar I needed. I needed about 1/4 inch more, so I did 2 more rows and then my bind off. And as I sit binding off, I pay no attention to the fact that the collar is very floppy. It hasn't really gathered in quite enough. But in my haphazard way that I've mentioned several times on this channel, I just kept going. I thought, it's fine, it's gonna be fine. Typically when you bind off, it gathers things in a little bit and it's gonna be sturdy and tight, and I don't wanna go too tight because you have to get the sweater over your head. And there have definitely been times where I've been binding off and I try to put a sweater over my head and I realize I did so too tightly. So anyway, I put the sweater on my husband. I wake him up this morning and I say, can you put the sweater on? I wanna get a clip of it finished so I can get the video up and share this hopefully finished product and project. And so he puts it on. I'm cutting to this footage now, and I immediately realize the collar is definitely too open. So you can see in this clip, I'm not really showing the collar. I'm trying to show that I fixed the puckering, the extra bit of fabric, but I'm avoiding his face. I'm avoiding the collar because it's not done. I have to go back and fix it again. So, oh my goodness, this is a great example of a time where I could take 5 minutes to look at what's happening, excuse me, figure out what I need to do, and do it once correctly. But instead, there are a million things going on. I'm watching a TV show, I have a cat in my lap and a cat on my shoulder, and I have to get to work, I have to get projects done. So I just push forward. I don't take the time to pause and look at what I really need to do. So anyway, you saw the clip, too much space here at the collar. It needed to be cinched in a little bit. So I'll cut to more footage here of me ripping back again. Thankfully, just ripping back 1 row, just pulling out the bind off, and then going through a decision-making process of what to do to make this bind off look good, but also bring it in a little bit. And that decision was to pull back 1 row, work a decrease round where I believe I was knitting 1, purling 1, knitting 1, purling 2 together. So I think I was working 3 stitches and then decreasing a stitch. You can see in the footage what I'm doing. It might have been that I was knitting 1, purling 1, and then working 2 together, but it was some sort of pattern I could keep track of. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. I pulled back 1 row, I picked up all of my stitches, I worked a single decrease round just to bring in that ribbed collar, and then I worked my bind off. And of course, because I snipped my tail when I thought I had finished the sweater yesterday, I didn't have enough yarn to do this. I could have pulled back 2 rows, but I wasn't thinking. So like mistake number 7 of 20 on this sweater. So all of that to say, when you're working on something and you run into an issue, if you have a friend, check in with your friend. If you don't have a physical friend that you can check in with, post it online, post it to a forum, ask for help, get a second opinion to save yourself a little bit of time. If you have a situation where you have really sort of screwed yourself over, let me know in the comments. I think sometimes there's just a lot going on, and for whatever reason, I know my brain pushes ahead. I work in my haphazard way, and then it costs me a bit of time later. So, all of that to say, I think the sweater is now complete. I've got it in front of me. No more puckering thanks to the little bits that we cut out. Amazing, amazing that that little bit of fabric was causing such puckering, but it was. So again, thank you to the wonderful suggestion from Nanikab, and thank you for so many of you who had the same sort of idea. This was the perfect solution. So I am absolutely indebted to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You saved me so much time and a lot of grief. I was disappointed in this sweater when I first finished it, but I think now it's something that I'm proud of, and I'm excited for my husband to be able to wear it, hopefully for many, many years to come. So I've got the collar all finished. I just need to weave in my end now that I know I'm happy with the final product. And I'll probably give this collar a little steam block, but otherwise I think things are laying pretty flat, pretty even, and I'm happy with it. So I'm going to cut to some final footage here of my husband wearing the finished sweater, all ends woven in, and hopefully you'll see a side-by-side comparison that it is no longer puckering the way it was when I followed the pattern instructions and first finished this garment a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I can't tell you how much fun I have with you. I don't always have fun sitting by myself, working on a project or editing a video, but I have a lot of fun once it's posted. I love seeing your comments, your reactions, your questions, your advice. It's really the most valuable thing to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm really excited that the channel continues to grow, and I'm excited to share a lot of ideas and things that I'll start doing with the channel in the coming months. So thanks for being a part of this community. Thank you for crafting with me, and thank you for sharing some of yourselves with me. Happy knitting, happy crocheting, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.